Welcome back to News Talk. Hillary Clinton has agreed to turn over to the Justice Department the private email server she used as Secretary of State. This comes as we learn more about how Clinton, the Democrats' 2016 frontrunner, used her personal email system. McClatchy News Service reporting that 2 of the 4 classified emails discovered on her private server were top secret, the highest possible security classification. Clinton has previously insisted that she did not send or receive classified information on her private system. Congressman TREY GOWDY is a Republican from South Carolina. He's chairman of the House Select Committee on Benghazi. He joins us now from the public television station in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Congressman, thanks very much for your time. It's good to be able to speak with you today.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
What is your reaction to the news that former Secretary of State Clinton is going to turn over her server to the Justice Department?
Well, my initial reaction is it's about time. In March of this year, we asked her to turn that server over to an independent, detached, neutral arbiter, whether that be the Inspector General or whether that be a retired judge, solely so someone other than a member of Congress can determine whether or not the public record is complete. My other reaction is to smile a little bit. Usually you don't voluntarily turn things over to the FBI. They ask for it and you comply with their request. But regardless, she should have done it in March when we first learned about this unusual arrangement she had with herself.
Why do you say neutral as opposed to the Justice Department? Was the Justice Department not your first choice as to who should be looking into this system that she deployed?
No, I think the Justice Department is neutral. At least it was when I worked there. In March, there was no allegation of any classified information, not even a hint of criminal impropriety. So you got to go back in March. And knowing what we knew then, we thought the smart thing to do was to turn the server over to the Inspector General for the State Department or a retired judge or anybody just to make sure the public record was complete. Once there became allegations of classified material, no, the FBI and the Department of Justice are precisely the right people, and they would also fit that characterization. But imagine if in March, if I had asked her to turn the server over to the FBI, I would have been criticized for that, for trying to elevate this to a criminal inquiry.
How troubling for you and for the folks that you're encountering on the streets of your district as your home for congressional recess? How troubling is this whole notion of a private email server used by a top government official who routinely is involved with and communicating very, very sensitive material?
Well, it's troubling at about every level. Something can be troubling. It's troubling from a standpoint of making sure the public record is complete. You know, nobody has to run for public office, and you don't have to accept it when you're asked to join public office. But when you do, there are certain rules you have to play by, and everyone else in the federal system, everyone else in the State Department, except a handful, had to use state.gov. So what we learned is that she was above the rules, and some of her closest aides also were above the rules because they got to use private email as well. So there's the classification concern, whether or not it's secure. There's also the concern that my committee has, which is whether or not we have access to everything we're entitled to figure out what happened to our 4 murdered Americans. And if you have a private-to-private email exchange that's never captured by a government computer, how are we ever going to know that the public record is complete?
She is currently the frontrunner in the chase for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2016. For some, this server use dovetails with a broader sense of the Clintons or of Hillary Clinton that the rules apply to others. Is this matter disqualifying or close to disqualifying to you and the people you interact with in your district in terms of her ability, potentially, if she's the nominee and prevails in November of 2016, to be President of the United States?
Well, I'm going to have to let other people make that determination. I'm just one person. I will vote, but I'm just one person. I think it is fair for my fellow citizens to expect people who aspire to serve at the highest levels to play by at least the same set of rules that they expect the rest of us. So if you think back to the ambassador who was working for her and was disciplined for doing exactly what she did, then one can draw the conclusion. In fact, I think a lot of my fellow citizens have drawn the conclusion that she believes there's a separate set of rules for her, and everyone else needs to play by a separate set. Now go back and think to what the explanation she offered, which is that she did this for convenience. What has been convenient about this email arrangement since we first learned about it? It's about as inconvenient for the American public as anything you can possibly imagine. So I don't think it was about convenience. I don't think it's about cooperation with the FBI and the DOJ. It's about control over the public record. Well, she had control, and now she's going to have all the issues and problems that go along with that.
She's agreed to testify before your committee on October the 22nd. What's your goal for that session, for that opportunity that you'll have, that you and your colleagues on the committee will have to discuss the raid on the American consulate in Benghazi? And to what extent will you be working to make sure the tone is what you and your constituents would want it to be, given the suspicion of some that this is a partisan opportunity, that this is a partisan thing to be able to take down a Democratic frontrunner as we ramp up into 2016?
Well, I was in the courtroom for 16 years, and the jury doesn't want to see bombastic, unfair, irrelevant questions. You can ask tough questions, but you better do so in a fair way. And Secretary Clinton will be treated fairly, as every other witness that we have interacted has been. If you go back to the 3 public hearings we've had so far, I haven't mentioned her name, not once. So the notion that this is about Hillary Clinton, the only reason you and I are talking about her today is because she had this unprecedented email arrangement with herself. There are outstanding questions in all 3 areas of Benghazi. Why we were there in the first place, the escalating violence and whether or not we matched that with an increase in security and personnel. Then you have the siege itself. Why were our assets positioned in such a way that they could not have gotten to Benghazi during the pendency of that attack? And then thirdly, this administration response to the attacks in Benghazi, whether it's blaming it on a spontaneous protest for which there is no evidence, or whether you're blaming it on a video like Susan Rice did for which there is 0 evidence, I think my fellow citizens are entitled to know why government either misled them or at a minimum should have said, you know, we don't know what happened in Benghazi, so we're not going to speculate on it until we have the facts. But that's not what they did. They told us it was a spontaneous reaction to a protest or a spontaneous protest that resulted in violence, and that is just simply false. So we're going to have a lot of questions for Secretary Clinton that deal with those 3 tranches of Benghazi. You
and 17 of your colleagues have signed a letter regarding the Planned Parenthood videos that have surfaced over the course of the last few weeks. When Congress comes back to town, will the controversy surrounding those videos potentially lead us to a government shutdown?
I hope not, but you would have to ask the President that if he really believes that funding an entity which has employees that are discussing infanticide on video is worth shutting down government for. I'm just telling you, there's certain things that I think my fellow citizens believe are emblematic or representative of us as a republic. And the selling of body parts, in addition to being a crime, is so barbaric, so deviant. You watch the videos and you tell me if you want to fund in any way, shape, or form an entity that is going to discuss the selling of body parts while you're eating a salad as if you're discussing the baseball game from the night before. So I can just say the people I work for have no interest in subsidizing infanticide. And if the President believes in Planned Parenthood's abortion mission enough to shut down government, we'll figure that out in October.
Finally, Congressman, we appreciate very much your time today. I want to ask you about a matter that folks here in the Washington area are grappling with. Memorial Bridge, which you are familiar with because of your service here in D.C. Memorial Bridge they've got the 2 lanes closed off, 1 in each direction, because the bridge is crumbling. This is a rather dramatic and maybe disappointing sort of reflection of where our infrastructure is across this country in terms of our roads and bridges. How come lawmakers haven't been able to come together on a highway funding bill, given the broad benefits of keeping our infrastructure from crumbling the way it is?
That's a great question, and I guess the answer is for the same reason that we have proven to be incapable of coming together on equally important matters, whether it's funding the troops without avoiding the shadow of a shutdown. That remains one of the more vexing questions to me, having been in Congress for the last 5 years, is why we wait until the precipice of a crisis and then seek to avert that crisis for 6 months. I have voted for the highway bill the last 2 times it's been on the floor. You can't do infrastructure projects in 6-month windows. So some people would tell you it's a pay for. Some folks would tell you there's a subset debate about the gas tax. All I know is it requires a lot of work to have a 7% public approval rating. And that's what Congress has. And when you see bridges crumbling and our inability to deal with one of the core functions of government, whether it be local, state, or federal, which is infrastructure, then you know how you get a 7% public approval rating.
Congressman TREY GOWDY, Republican of South Carolina, joining us from the educational station in Spartanburg. Congressman, thanks very much for your time today. We appreciate being able to speak with you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
An update on the hour's top stories and the end of the week forecast straight ahead. And then, would the Nationals be better off with a new manager?